When you look at Tasmania, a lot of it is protected in national parks and World Heritage areas, but it's those areas of land that are owned privately that actually have the most significant biodiversity values and are super important for conservation in Tassie. The Tasmanian Land Conservancy took over the Land for Wildlife program about 5 years ago from the state government, and it was a key opportunity for us to engage with private landholders across the state and improve their understanding and engagement with the conservation values that they manage on their own land.
The research came about from a recognition by the federal government, as well as state and territory governments and our local partners, that private land plays an essential role in delivering conservation outcomes. It is often where you find our most threatened species and ecological communities, and we have the opportunity to tap into a very large community of conservation-minded, highly motivated people that want to look after nature to deliver on outcomes. In voluntary programs like Land for Wildlife, we hear time and again from property owners that they're highly motivated, they want to look after their properties for wildlife, but that they often just need a bit more advice about how to achieve their own objectives. We wanted to understand how to best empower property holders to look after nature on their properties, knowing that programs like Land for Wildlife are often delivered by very small, philanthropic, not-for-profit organizations, and that we need to help individual property holders to be self-sufficient in their journeys to look after nature.
We've got about 900 members now across the state, which is just amazing. They're covering about 35,000 hectares of land, which means different things to different people, but basically it means there's over 900 landholders who are actively protecting their land across Tassie.
Land for Wildlife members are really varied in their demographics. We have people that are, in retirement age that have a lot of time on their hands, right through to people that have just moved to Tasmania, don't know anything about the place, want to learn everything, to people that have got sort of some really good intact bush, but also other places that require either active management or revegetation. Probably 50% of my job is to go out onto people's property, spend time with them on their property, usually shown around by them on their tracks. We go and have a look at the vegetation mapping that's turned up on their property through the government TasVeg site, and we see if that is actually what it is out there, and then we talk about the species that live there in terms of plants and the type of wildlife those plants might attract and the sort of management opportunities that exist for landholders to enhance that or to continue to make that suitable for wildlife.
The Land for Wildlife Property Report is both a natural values assessment and a mini property management plan. And it's a co-creation between the Land for Wildlife assessor, the property owner, and the program as a whole. We wanted to understand how the Land for Wildlife program currently provides advice to its members, and we wanted to understand whether that advice actually helps members to manage their properties for conservation. And finally, we wanted to understand how Land for Wildlife could tweak that advice or the way that it's provided to better meet Land for Wildlife members' needs.
We chose the Noticing Nature framework as a means of studying this. And essentially, Noticing Nature framework says that as we notice the things around us, we learn. And as we learn, we begin to want to understand. And as we understand, and if we're given the right tools, we start to look after things.
We worked with Land for Wildlife staff to identify the research questions and the research purpose, and then refined the research findings together to work out how we could use those to improve some of the communication products that they have. I conducted online surveys of Land for Wildlife members, asking them about their perceptions of the advice they've received through the Land for Wildlife program, about the degree to which they have goals and management objectives for their properties already, and what they would like to see the program provide to them to help them reach their goals. I also completed some quantitative and qualitative reviews of previously issued Land for Wildlife property reports to get a feel for the topics that Land for Wildlife provides advice on and how they go about doing that. Our surveys of Land for Wildlife members revealed that a lot of people actually have a very strong conservation knowledge base. So they're highly knowledgeable about the species and threats that are on their own properties, and they also have very clear management goals for their own properties. Around 60% of our survey respondents believe that they've received useful, actionable advice from the Land for Wildlife program, but only around 40% said that their management actions are actually based on the advice they've received.
So a key finding from our research was reinforcing our previous understanding that property holders that are volunteering into these types of programs are highly motivated, they're willing and able to look after nature on their properties, but that they often need easy to find, easy to enact pieces of advice. And we've worked in collaboration with Tasmanian Land Conservancy to take the very best findings from their existing reports to turn those into actionable advice top tips.
I worked together with the Land for Wildlife staff to revise my research findings and apply them to some updates to some of the key communication documents used by the program. So we refreshed and updated the format of the Land for Wildlife report template. We added some sections to better articulate the landholders' aims and goals, and to follow that up with really specific advice that connects back with their aims for the property. We also revised the Land for Wildlife tips page. To make the tips page more actionable and targeted, we titled each tip with the desired action, using simple kind of do statements and balancing negative kind of language around threats and problems with positive, easy solutions. We also revised some of the language within the report template. So it's not just about giving information, but it's also about using empowering language that encourages people to take the next steps. Breaking things down into a series of very specific steps helps to lower the barrier to action.
I think it's good to always evaluate the work you're doing in a program like this, because we have what we think we're delivering versus what the expectations of our clients are. And so it's good to understand what they think the program's about so that we can perhaps tailor it towards those needs. But it's also good for us to understand how we promote the program and what we tell people we can offer as well. I can see that the work that we're doing with UTAS is going to be really helpful in creating a way of empowering landholders to do work on their land in a fairly self-sufficient way.
The Land for Wildlife program is a big investment for our organisation. It was a great opportunity to partner with the University of Tasmania and the NEST project to better understand what our Land for Wildlife members were actually wanting in terms of the program that we were able to provide. And now we're basically rolling out that template to all new Land for Wildlife members as they join. And we're also able to add and subtract depending on the Land for Wildlife assessor's interests and knowledge, and also the property owner's interests and knowledge. So it's a very flexible but much more streamlined report that we've been provided.